The following is a King-Fisher Media production.
Hey guys, you're listening to the In the Blood podcast. I am your host, AC Bergen-Fischer, and thank you so much for listening, whether you are a new or returning listener. I'd like to invite you to find a quiet place where you can consider what's being shared with an open mind and a receptive heart. Before we begin, though, the following disclaimer. I am not a therapist, and nothing presented here should be considered as therapy. If you feel that therapy would be beneficial, please seek out a licensed therapist who you trust. I'd like to welcome everybody to the In the Blood podcast. I've got a very, very special guest today. Her name is Sarah. Sarah is a person who, while I was growing up, I never would have been allowed to talk to because she would have been dismissed as a witch or an evildoer or any of these things. But I don't see her that way. In fact, one of the things that made me most curious about her is she seems to have a passion very similar to my own, which is to help people connect with themselves and use that relationship with self to help them kind of thrive in other areas of life. But I don't want to put too many words in her mouth. I will welcome Sarah to introduce herself in her own words, and now I will be quiet.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I grew up in a very similar type household. I grew up very Christian, so this was definitely a no-no for me as well. Up until I was about 15, 16 was when I finally started to ask some questions, and that's when I actually dived into tarot for the first time, was around 15 or 16 years old. And even then I felt like my parents were looking at me with a side eye, like, what does she have going on over there? But yeah, I've been reading tarot for friends and family for about 18, 19 years. And then I decided to go professional about 2.5 years ago, which was not planned, but one of the best things I've ever done and chosen to do with my life. So it is really similar to what you just said. I don't do what's called fortune telling. I won't focus on like predictive type readings. I can tell you and often do tell you where you're headed as of right now. But I don't believe the future is set in stone. So I do believe that it's more of a guidance of this is where you're heading as of right now. But based on what you choose and what you do in the now is going to change how your future plays out. So what I really like to focus on, my favorite thing that I like to focus on in a reading is kind of where you've been, where you're at now. And then my favorite part is the roadmap that I feel comes from spirit, not from me. I feel like I'm the middleman woman, channeler, so to speak, but the messages that come through is more like what you need to know to help you reach your highest and best self. And that's like the meat and the potatoes of the reading itself, which is similar to what you shared as far as wanting to help people reconnect with their own inner wisdom and reconnect with their higher self.
Well, it sounds like so far, though, we take different approaches with our methodology to helping people. I think the nuts and bolts of it all sounds more or less the same. I'm honestly dying to know like how this actually works in like a step-by-step kind of way. Because for me, I draw more on I guess the hyper awareness I developed as a trauma response, which to some people may look like a mystical power, but I mean, for me, it's like, it's all very real. I'm seeing things other people are ignoring. It sounds like you've got kind of a more spiritual eye than like a traumatized eye, if I'm understanding you.
Yeah, I am. So, I mean, I think many of us have our own trauma background, and I am not excluding myself from that at all. I definitely have that. But for me, tarot is definitely more of a spiritual experience. And it's more of, I feel like it's more about me connecting with, well, okay, let me back up. Sorry. We all have two different kinds of, like, our souls are split down the middle. We have our souls and our higher self, and then we have our ego, which is our mind. And our mind is the one that likes to make sense of things and usually is the one that wants to be safe. And the soul's always wanting to grow and evolve. And with that said, when I do my readings, I like to take out my ego. I don't like to try and understand what the message is, why it's coming in the way it is, because when I do, the readings always go sideways because I'm trying to figure it out and the message isn't for me. And I've just learned on a spiritual level that whatever comes through is what the person needs to hear. And I've seen it play out again and again and again. Even if it makes zero sense to me, it almost always, like 99% of the time, makes perfect sense to the person I'm reading for. So that's where I remove my ego, and I don't try to understand why certain messages are coming in. I just trust that what came through was meant to come through, and just share what I'm seeing and feeling. But ultimately it's to help them, reach their highest and best self. But I don't pre-plan what I'm going to say. It just organically happens.
That sounds like a really, really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it's something that I didn't see coming my way. I didn't even know I was really gifted in this. It was more of a tarot, something that anyone can do. It's not too terribly special. I was able to go buy my first deck at Barnes & Noble's when I was 15, 16 years old. But what I found when I started doing this professionally is that my gift is really being able to, one, I think removing the ego is super important, because some readers that don't remove their ego can put in judgment, and it's not so spirit-based at that point. So I think that's part of my gift, is being able to remove my ego, but also I can see, it's hard to explain, but I can see the storyline. I can see how the cards and the story kind of weaves together. It's hard to explain. It's easier to showcase, but it's.
So is showcasing it something that you would be able to do on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I have my cards here and everything. So.
Okay, so as long as you can promise me I'm not getting demon possessed here. I just need to satisfy my Christian mother.
No, absolutely not. So, and I don't know if this will make her feel any better. My mother's Christian,
okay.
And she's very much aware of what I do and supports me. She doesn't understand what I do, but she's very supportive of.
Fair enough.
That it's my passion. But no, it's the way that, okay, so many people will almost liken tarot to like a Ouija board, which is so funny to me because they're not the same thing at all. But I've had a lot of people say, oh, is it like the spirits of the beyond that are, or demons or things like that? And it's not. It's none of those things. And the way that I like to describe it, so my personal spiritual belief is that we're all one. We're all interconnected. And so each of our higher selves are all connected to other people's higher selves. I feel like it's source that runs through each of us. And so what I feel like how tarot works is it's all about intention. If everyone shows up with the intention of wanting to reach their highest and best self, and it could be around any question. It doesn't have to always be just what's my highest and best self message. It could be, I'm in this funk in my relationship. What do I need to know around it? Or I feel like my career is kind of a dud. What do I need to know about? I mean, you could really ask any question, but when you come with the intention of, I really am trying to reach my highest and best self and learn more about what spirit wants me to know and how to get there, then at that point, I feel like spirit is showing up for the person I'm reading for. And so I always do it in love and light. And I really believe that God, source, divine, whatever you believe is, your own source of divinity, that's what's showing up for you as your own personal guidance. And that's what I have learned to just trust and go with, and have seen it play out in very positive ways over and over and over. So definitely not possessive or any of that.
No, I like the way you describe this, though, because I mean, like I've said, like right from our first interaction, I am a skeptic. But the way you are describing this connection, I mean, this is stuff I can wrap my skeptical mind around, because I've experienced that where I enter a conversation with somebody who is similarly minded, where we both got the goal of let's accomplish a thing. And for lack of a better term, it does almost seem like there is a magic to these interactions. There's that little piece where it's like, I don't feel like that's you or me. It's almost like this third entity that has entered the situation, and it's almost like we're both being, quote unquote, guided towards a solution. And hearing you talk about how tarot kind of plays into that, now I'm thinking, maybe all these years of skepticism, maybe I've just been splitting hairs over how I would label or describe things, but we're all talking about more or less the same thing. I don't know. I guess we'll find out, right?
Yeah. I think that it also doesn't help that Hollywood and just society in general has deemed tarot cards as, evil, or you also get the people who think of like scam artists, things like that. So there's definitely a stigma around it. And if you don't understand it and haven't been exposed to it in a positive way, it would make sense that you would go with what you know, which is what society in Hollywood would like society to believe.
Okay.
Did you want to go ahead and get a reading while I'm on your show?
I can. Yeah, if that's something you're open to, I'm right into it.
Okay, perfect. So I can focus on an area of your life, and this could be really any area, but I'd like to just kind of give some examples like love, career, purpose, etc. Or we can just see what your higher self wants you to know and have it come just more general, but more like what you need to know without you having to ask a specific question.
I feel like to satisfy my skepticism, taking the broadest approach is probably the most likely to yield a result that we're both going to be happy with.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. No worries. So let me go ahead and so just to kind of share a little bit about the background of tarot, there are 78 cards in a deck, which is a little bit more than a playing deck, the playing card deck, which has 52 cards, although they're very similar. And I don't think a lot of people know that either, because they think of tarot and they think something super mystical, but it's actually very similar to playing cards. In fact, I could do a reading with playing cards if I don't have a candy. Yes, I can. So the tarot deck, it's split into two different arcanas. There's the major arcana, which is where you'll find cards like the moon, the sun, the hermit, like they're like the trump cards. And then you have the minor arcana, which are suits, and that's where you can find the playing card similarity. There is wands, cups, pentacles or coins, and swords. And each of those suits have its general focus. And it even has, it doesn't have a jack, but it has page, which is similar to the jack, queen, and king, which is, so in a playing card deck, I would just use a jack as a page. But so it's just missing some of those really heavy-handed cards, but you could still do a reading with playing cards as well, which is pretty cool. All right, so I went ahead and did my higher self spread, and it's 7 cards. The first card I want to go over is your theme, and then we have past, present, future energies, and then higher self messages overall. And the higher self messages overall is the meat and potatoes I was telling you about, where it's more of the roadmap to help you get where you want to go. And feel free, if you want to comment on anything as I go, you can, or you could just sit and listen and share feedback afterwards. Either way is totally fine.
All right.
But just don't feel like if you want to say something, don't feel like you have to like wait for me to finish. So.
Okay. I'm not going to like ruin your flow.
No, not at all. So starting with the theme, the first card that I pulled up as a theme is the Lovers reversed. So this one is actually kind of a cool card that it's reversed, because it does speak to an awareness around this topic. But the Lovers, I read this one a little bit differently than like the traditional. The Lovers usually show up as an invitation to know that you are already whole as you are. So usually when the Lovers is present, there's something outside of you that you're chasing to fill you up. Like, oh, once I reach this thing, then I'll be whole. Then I'll be complete. It's kind of looking for happiness outside of you. When it's reversed, there's an awareness to that, to enough to know, I know that I really want that thing, but I also know that that thing is not, my worth is not attached to it. And you don't need it to make you whole. So it's cool that it's reversed, because that tells me that you've done a lot of self-awareness around just knowing that you're already a whole and complete person as you are. Even though you're growing and evolving, you already know that there's nothing outside of you that needs to complete you. That you're just reconnecting with yourself on a deeper level as you're growing and evolving, versus looking for answers outside of you.
I find this one really, really fascinating, because for the majority of my life, I was seeking external sources to kind of complete me. And it's just been over the course of the last year where there's been really a drastic philosophical shift for me internally, where I'm like you say, still wanting the thing, but realizing that the thing isn't going to satisfy the need. And I have done a lot of, self-awareness work, like just a ridiculous amount in the last couple of years. So I'm already like getting kind of goosebumpy here. This is so far so good.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm telling you as far as that awareness, because most people don't know that they're already whole. And what I like to say is, when whatever it is that thing is offering you, that you feel like, once I get that, it's going to give me this. Because obviously, if you want something, you expect it to bring you something. So like if you want a promotion, maybe it'll bring you confidence. Or if you want to be in a relationship, maybe it'll fill up that love cup that you have missing. How can you fill that for yourself? So then once you reach that thing, it's not attached to your, to your sense of wholeness. It's just something that you now have, and it's great, but you're not holding your worth to that thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
So that's our starting point, is just that you have done a lot of work around that self-awareness piece. And, that's our starting point.
Okay.
Looking at your recent past. This is interesting. I don't normally see this one in the recent past. So actually, I'm going to pull one more card around it just to kind of see if I can get a little more information. So it's the Two of Wands reversed, which usually speaks to feelings of impatience and like wanting to know the status of something. Interesting. Okay. So it's reversed, which usually speaks to impatience. It's basically saying that there's something in your recent past that you kind of kept looking for the answer of. And it could be like the status of something. You're waiting to find out just some kind of a answer internally of something. And with this card, I like to compare it to baking cookies, because usually when you bake cookies, you don't sit there and keep checking on it. You just put the cookies in the oven, you set the timer, and you do other things till it goes off. And you're not focusing and obsessing about the cookies. You're like, oh, they're baking. I'll know when it's time. And so when this card comes up, it's usually like you're checking on the cookies and you need to stop checking on the cookies. The timer will go off when the timing is right. So I find it interesting that this was in your past, because this isn't present or future or anything like that. So something in your recent past was you were feeling like you had to keep checking on and looking on. And the card that I pulled for that is the Six of Cups. And this one is all about going back into, it's like inner child work is really what it is. It's going backwards and doing a lot of, there's one of two ways. Either you can go backwards and get stuck there because either nostalgia, or it could even be, if there's trauma where you kind of get stuck in reliving it when you go back. Or the more positive aspect of it is looking at how far you've come, really looking at how this is where I was and this is where I am now. And so I feel like with these two cards side by side in your recent past, it's telling me that there was that sense of impatience, I think, was more so around getting to the place where you felt like, okay, look how far I've come. I'm really okay now. And I feel like that's even speaking to the lovers a little bit too, that sense of, I feel like the healing that you were trying to do in your past, this inner child work, you were feeling like once you've made it to a certain point, then you would feel that sense of wholeness. And I think that's the impatience that you're kind of waiting on, was like, have I reached that healing peak yet? Am I there? And then I think it's just kind of coming back to that theme of you're already there. Healing is good, and it's good to go backwards, but you don't want to constantly overdo it, and you don't want to feel like there's a destination to it either. It's all evolving, and it's not linear, it's spiralic, if that makes sense. So this is
like such a fascinating component, because like I've been in therapy for years, like years and years and years. And my most recent therapist, what she said is, you are a relentless self-improver, and that is kind of detrimental to your self-improvement. She says, you're the person who's like driving down the road, staring at the check engine light, thinking the car's going to blow up, instead of taking that brake, pulling over to the side, turning the engine off, and like waiting for help.
Right.
And even using your example, I know it was like you're talking about metaphorical cookies.
Yes.
I literally will watch the cookies bake. That is a function of my personality. So I found that really, really funny. And again, going back to the therapy component, you're talking about like going back but not getting stuck there. I was doing that basically my whole life up until a fairly profound breakthrough over the course of the last year, where I actually got in an argument with my therapist. She says, you know, you're not defined by your past experiences. You have to keep pushing forward. And I said, you know what? I got to push back on that, because if I'm not defined by my past experiences, what am I defined by? As far as I can tell from my perspective, that's literally the only thing that defines me. I mean, I can make choices about moving forward, like how today is going to become a past experience tomorrow. I can choose how to define today to control like tomorrow's past experiences, but the past is always going to be the thing that is defining where I'm at today. And once I got comfortable with that fact that like the past isn't a place to visit, it's a place to draw from, and even the most hurtful things back there, I'm kind of like looking at it as a reference book. Okay, this is how I was built. These are the glitches I can expect as a result of that. So rather than complain and think, wow, this isn't fair, I shouldn't have been built this way, I can celebrate how I'm built, and I can understand some of the strengths and also limitations of how I'm built, and use like these things that had previously just brought me to my knees to actually lift me up to new heights. I don't know if any of this is making sense, and as far as like how you're interpreting the cards.
That actually makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah. It speaks to that feeling of impatience of I want to just heal myself. And now you're learning that, like you said, it's exactly what you said. It is a reference point, because present, this is how I like to describe the past, present, and future. Past is gone. Yes, it's experiences that will revisit us always, you know, until we finally heal them. And even then, I think there's always going to be something that will come up. Even if you think you're completely healed, usually there's something else to heal. And in the future, it's not here yet. And it never comes the way you think it's going to come. Doesn't matter how many times you stress or worry or imagine the future, it never, ever plays out the way you think it will. And so the present, so when you ask, how do you define yourself? You define yourself with how you're living your life right now. Because the present is literally all we have. This is where life happens. It doesn't happen in the past. It doesn't happen in the future. It happens now. And it's remembering to be mindful in those moments, in the now, as much as you can be, because this is where everything happens.
Yeah, that's fair.
So moving to the present card. I love this. So it's the Four of Wands. And this one is basically saying that you need more fun in your life. You need to, and so I think that fun is a form of self-care that's not talked about enough. There's the emotional self-care, there's the physical self-care, there's the mental health self-care, but who talks about creativity and you know, really just having a good time as being self-care? It's not talked about enough, I don't think. So when the Four of Wands comes up, it's really an invitation to find more joy in your life, whether that's going out with friends or finding a hobby that you can just really dive into. But I like to call the Four of Wands a mini vacation card. So higher self is saying basically you need a mini vacation, but it doesn't have to be an actual vacation. It's just something that you can put down reality for a little while. You can put down the, you know, any of the traumas or the hard stuff you're going through, or just, you know, life in general. You can put it down for a little while and just go and have a good time without carrying that weight for a bit, and then come back and carry it when you're more in a better mindset and better, just when you have fun, it's easy to come back in your joy versus creating joy from a place where you're struggling to find it. And so presently the invitation here is to really take more time for fun. And whenever I see this card too, I think of what society has taught us, which is work hard, play later. And the more I've learned, I dive into spirituality, my own spirituality, and what, you know, the tarot brings and all this, and my own personal experiences. It's not about work now, play later. It's about playing as much as you can while you're working too. It's bringing more play and more joy without putting any kind of conditioning on it.
This is actually, for me as an individual, profoundly insightful, because the having fun component is like, even when I was a kid, I mean, I was the kid that would drink chocolate milk and I wouldn't enjoy the flavor because I was afraid of getting a mustache. You know, like I would be careful how fast I would run because I didn't want to get grass stains on the knees of my pants. Part of that probably was tied into a little bit of child abuse, but part of it too is I think functions of my personality, and it's carried through adulthood. I feel like I'm wired to be a completely inside of the box thinker, and there is a cold and dysfunctional practicality that comes along with that I struggle so hard to move away from. Like in the last couple of years, I've forced myself to indulge in artistic things. It doesn't come naturally to me, but as unnatural as it feels, I feel like it frees me up in other ways. I do catch myself sometimes, you know, like if I'm doing a painting project and like, wow, that painting looks absolutely ridiculous. I did one I hate. It's still hanging on my wall. And the reason I leave it there is just it's a reminder that things don't always turn out the way that I want, but it's not always about the destination. Sometimes the destination is wholly irrelevant because the journey is so profoundly necessary.
Yes, it's about how much fun did you have making the painting versus how it turned out. It's
like all of the fun.
So moving into your near future, I think this is really cool. So I have two cards to the near future. This is the near future card, which is the star reversed. And then the 10 of Pentacles is like the higher self message to the near future card. So the star, and it's interesting because we were just talking about, you know, not overdoing the going back and healing thing. So this is more, so I feel like the way this came up is more specific healing. So the star itself always represents deep, deep, deep healing. But like usually it goes back to even like childhood wounds, like way back. There's resistance around this. And what I feel like it's speaking to specifically is that 10 of Pentacles. The 10 of Pentacles is it's all about saying that you're meant to. Sorry.
We can edit that out. No worries.
Good. My daughter left her tablet in here and I didn't realize. Let me turn off the sound. Okay. So the 10 of Pentacles, it's all about bringing people together. It's about saying the impact that you have on the world in bringing people together and sharing your story and helping other people. And I mean, even if you look in the picture, you can see all the people holding hands, standing in circles. This is what you're supposed to be doing for the world through your own story and through your own impact, and trusting that you're supposed to do that. And that's the biggest part, is trusting. Because whenever I see this card, there's always this kind of feeling of, you know, it's just me. Like, I don't do all that, but you do. Whenever this is present, that's exactly what it's saying. So I feel like moving into the near future, what your higher self is really encouraging you to do is to heal whatever it is that started, that makes you feel like you can't own that superpower that you have of bringing people together. And this is like with your story, with how you connect with people. And I feel like this is speaking almost more to your I mean, this could be one-on-one, but I feel like this is speaking to your podcast and what you do for other people on your podcast. But yeah, it's saying that you're holding yourself back from really owning the power that you have in the world. And it's something your childhood, like way back. And you're ready to deal with it. Whenever there's resistance around going back around this card, the star, it's usually because people are afraid to go there. They're like, I'm not sure I'm really ready to deal with that thing. And so they'll like kind of avoid it. But whenever the star is present, it's saying you're ready. You're ready to go back and deal with it. And so it's something around your mindset, around your impact and the positive difference that you make in the world, and really owning that you're meant to be helping other people in a big way. So
okay, this one's got me actually like fighting back the tears a little bit, because outwardly I have never actually admitted this hesitation that you're describing, or that insecurity, however you want to describe it, I encourage other people always, like, just push forward. Like, you've got power, you've got value, your story counts for something, even if you haven't fixed yourself. Walking along somebody and just side somebody and putting your hand on their shoulder. And even if all you share of your story is saying, I understand because I'm going through something similar. These are all the things I would tell other people to do. But inwardly, this is the secret component that I struggle with, like, constantly, is always feeling like I'm not ready for that next step. And it just, the fact that you could just drive right down to the middle of it, because I mean, up until this point, I mean, it could be argued probably from some of the even more skeptical people that are listening that, oh, okay, well, some of these quote unquote insights that the cards are quote unquote showing to Sarah, these might be things that anybody who's paid attention to my work over the course of the years, read my blogs, listened to podcasts, all these other things, they could have, if they were willing to put in the hundreds of hours, come up with this complete picture. But even a random shot in the dark to have a hit that strong, it's something I have never shared. I've never even talked to my wife about this. Okay. Like, when I say, like, this is a secret, I don't mean this is something I don't often talk about. I don't even say it out loud when I'm talking to myself. I don't acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. But you just, I mean, I can't say you showed it to me, but you pointed a light on it so that I could see it. And I could see that it obviously wasn't hidden universally. Like, that to me, holy crap.
That's exactly. And thank you for being so transparent and sharing how that message impacted you. And what you just described right now, how I shined a light on it, that's exactly what tarot does for you. It's and that when I work with clients and I do readings for clients, like, that seems to be what I pick up over and over again. It's like things that they already know, that, like, you maybe haven't even spoken out aloud to anyone else, that they just weren't paying, like, they weren't focusing their energy there. And that's now they don't, oh my gosh, this is where I need to be putting my focus. This, it's shining a light on the areas that, like, for instance, I've had people tell me, wow, this is like a mini therapy session. And I like to say, no, this is not therapy, because this isn't coming from me. I'm just interpreting the cards. But this could be a helpful tool to know what to take to therapy, to work with, to unpack and look more into. That's the difference. And so, yeah, that's a pretty good way to kind of hone in on what it is that I offer. And what I do is it's shining a light on what you most need to know right now.
Well, I am a huge fan of therapy. I'm a huge fan of coaching. I'm a huge fan of working on self. But I think gaining the kind of insights that I don't want to say that you're giving people, the kind of insights that you're facilitating, I think would probably be more accurate, right?
Yeah.
I think from today forward, I'm going to be a huge fan of that too, because I mean, the more we know about ourselves, I mean, the more empowered we are to get comfortable with who we are, to fix the things that maybe we think are broken.
And something I wanted to add to that too. So I've also been in lots of therapy myself, and
okay.
My last therapist was probably the best one I ever had. And he really altered my life in ways I can't even explain. But towards the end, before I stopped seeing him, one of the things he kept saying to me, like the last 6 months, he would say, that sounds like a spiritual problem. And I didn't know what the heck that meant, because I wasn't very spiritual at the time. I was agnostic. This was before I was reading tarot. I was agnostic. I believed in something, but I didn't have any tangible idea of what the heck that meant. And so he kept saying that to me. I was like, what is, I mean, obviously it was planting a seed, and it was one that much needed to be planted, which is what got me to start looking into what are my beliefs and actually exploring it, which started with podcasts. I started listening to different podcasts that just, wow, this really resonates. This makes sense. This, and it opened up my mind and everything. But I feel like a lot of the times, what just therapy or just coaching can do, and just self-development without that spiritual piece. It's more like you're hammering down on yourself, whereas the spiritual piece really brings in a sense of grace and self-love and forgiveness, and just like it brings in a gentleness, because you also know that you have something bigger than yourself that's also wanting to cheer for you and guide you on. And I feel like tarot also brings that to a lot of clients who maybe were, struggling with feeling like that untethered feeling of, well, what am I doing with my life? And am I out here all by myself? And realizing like, no, obviously there's something guiding me, because these messages are so personal and so, cute to them, that it helps them understand there is something bigger than them that's guiding them and helping them along in life. And so I feel like when it doesn't matter what your spiritual belief is, like I also don't think there's like one particular, shoe that fits all, but I think it's having that faith. It's the faith that people need along with that self-development journey that's really, really important.
You had mentioned like quite a few things I want to address in like kind of a broad sense. I think all these different types of insights that you're describing that I think people obviously can gain through tarot, these are all valuable things. There was one thing that was conspicuously missing from the list, which I don't know if that was an oversight or if this was just maybe I've got a unique take on things. But when you were shining a light on that one component that I had never shared before, I kind of had this holy crap, you see it too moment. It's really, really easy for us to second guess ourselves as people when we think we're the only person seeing the shadow in the corner of the room, say. We're the only one who saw that flash of light, whatever. But when somebody else is like, oh, I saw it too. Okay, now it's a lot more difficult for me to second guess myself. Now I can stop making excuses. Now it's time to do the work. Like there's just no way to avoid it. It is there. It has been confirmed, right?
Right.
So that I think is huge. And I want everybody who's listening to really, really stew on that. I mean, I'm not saying stop seeing your therapist or your coach. I'm not saying stop with the DIY books, but maybe look at this avenue as well. Like gain that little bit of extra insight, which is fantastic. Like goosebumps all over, like no joke. I was expecting for you to give me some half-baked woo today and for me to think, oh my God, how do I politely tell the guest that I think she's talking out her ass? But that's not what's been happening today. Like I can see what your clients are saying where they feel like this is a therapy session, because whereas you're reading cards, my therapist reads psychology textbooks, right? I mean, maybe it's not like the same kind of reading, like not the same definition of reading, but I mean, you've both got your reference points.
Right.
You're both achieving the same thing, which is to help me gain the insights that I need to manage AC.
Right.
Okay, so now that I've dumped a whole lot of words there,
I do have two more cards to go over. If
okay, then I won't. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the last two cards are more like higher self messages, just connecting to everything that I've already shared. So I feel like this. So the first one, Seven of Swords, I feel like this is speaking a lot to that Ten of Pentacles we were just talking about. I feel like it's kind of the how the star speaks to old childhood things you need to heal. I think this to specifically what you need to go look back for, like kind of the like this is the reference point to look for. So it's the Seven of Swords and it's reversed. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's not reversed. So when it's reversed, there's usually an element of self-awareness. It's not reversed, so this may not even be something that you've looked at yet. But the Seven of Swords usually speaks to feelings of not being enough, feelings of not being adequate in some way, of not having what you need to show up as the way you want to be. And so what could be holding you back from really owning what you do as far as bringing people together and helping people is where did you learn in your childhood that you weren't enough, that you weren't adequate, that you didn't have the means to really show up the way that you wanted to show up as. Now, the thing about the swords, the suit swords, it's all about the mind. And so what's the problem with the mind is that it creates stories and narratives and perceptions that most of the time aren't true. So this is definitely one of those cases where the Seven of Swords, this is your perception of not, like, that's like your deep seated, like, I don't feel like I'm enough to really step into this role of owning that I help people come together. But it's not true. That feeling of not being enough is not true. And that's just the perception story that you've been carrying for a very long time. And so whenever I see the Seven of Swords, I always recommend, like, get curious about where that started. What was maybe a starting point where, or an event or something that happened where maybe you were trying to show up as your best self and really own, like, yeah, I want to help people and I want to bring people together. And someone may have said, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or sit back down, or whatever it was. So I feel like that's kind of almost a reference point, because saying with the star, you need to go back and heal something around what's holding you back here. It's just super vague. But I feel like the Seven of Swords is just like, this is the focus that you're being asked to look, go backwards. And then the final card that came up, there is self-awareness around this one. It's the Two of Swords reversed. And so this one tells me that you've likely used to be the type of person who would like get a bunch of opinions from everyone else before you made any kind of big decisions. You wanted everyone else's input. Like, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And that could even backfire if you get multiple different opinions around the same thing. The thing about the Two of Swords is it really encourages you to unplug from what everyone else's opinion is. And again, there's self-awareness here. So I think that this is something you're already working on. But it's starting to trust that the only person whose voice really matters in this big decision that you have is yours. You're the one that it's going to impact. You're the one that you need to consult with instead of everyone else for validation and opinions. And so that came up as well. And so I feel like higher self is letting you know, like, keep doing that work. Because again, there's self-awareness. You might still get yourself caught up in asking for opinions, but I think you're getting better at maybe asking one or two people and then taking time to go inward and ask yourself too. You're starting to ask yourself as much as you're asking anyone else, which is good. But this is ultimately about learning to trust yourself. And that, I feel like, is also speaking to coming back to that Ten of Pentacles, which I feel like is where higher self is really wanting to lead you towards, is don't second guess yourself so much as far as like the decisions you do with your, I don't know if it's with your podcast or other areas of your life where you help people, but if you get this feeling like, I should do this, before you go and ask anyone else, ask yourself, like, really sit with it. How does that feel in your body? How does that decision feel before you try and like ask for outside opinions? Because that's ultimately what it's asking you to do, is listen and trust yourself.
That is a combination of powerful and ridiculously accurate for me.
And that's it. So that's the reading. We're done.
Yeah, I see where I had a lot of words interrupting the last portion of the reading. Now I'm just sort of sitting here. Holy crap! You give me so much to stew on. And I mean, it's timely, because I feel like after years and years and years of therapy, I've kind of like hit this plateau. I mean, my therapist actually so much as told me 2 sessions ago, I think we've gone as far together as we can, but do you mind if we continue our sessions so I can draw from your insights? I'm thinking, I'm not going to therapy to give therapy. But sitting down with you today, it's like, man, this is the most progress I've made in the last 18 months. So, and it's not like you've specifically told me, okay, you need to do ABC all across the board. I mean, you've given me some pretty strong nudges in certain directions, but ultimately it's like that awareness to allow me to carry myself where you're nudging me.
That is something that I do really strive for. Because I do have people who will come to me and ask me to tell them what to do. And I really try to refocus it and tell them it's not my job to tell you what to do. I'm here to empower you to make the next best decision for you. I'm not you. And again, these insights aren't coming from me. They're coming from something else showing up for you. So I don't, it's not my responsibility to make those decisions. That's where that self accountability piece comes in for my clients that I work with as well. Is I want to empower them to feel like they can make the next right decision, however it feels right for them. And I also want to say too, I don't believe that there is a right or wrong way to go when it comes to the decisions you make in your life. I just think that whatever decision that you make is the one you were supposed to make, and the one you just means you have something to learn from that path either way. But I just wanted to say that I don't tell people what to do and like, oh, you should do this. I really try very hard to stay away from that verbiage and that kind of energy.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that there's, yeah, I don't know. I'm still like, my mind's a little scrambled right now because you kind of like overwhelm me with insight, but I think that's great. A great approach you're taking. There was one word that has come up multiple times in this conversation, and it's a word that I've gone on record many times before as saying I hate it because it doesn't seem to have any universal meaning. But at the same time, I love it because every person I talk to is going to give me a slightly different take on what it means. And that word is spirituality. What does spirituality mean to you?
It's a great question. So with my personal beliefs, they're so broad that they can't fit into any particular belief system. Like I don't have any religion that I follow because to me, it's just too much of trying to fit into a box. And I've looked into different ones. So for me, spirituality encompasses everything. It encompasses all the belief systems because ultimately I think that they're all one and the same. But for me, I think if I were to simplify it, I'd say spirituality is faith.
Okay.
At its core, because you can have spirituality and be Christian or Buddhist or whatever, religion you might be following. But there's religious, which is more following the rituals and the to-dos. And then there's spiritual, which is more of a relationship with whatever the modality is that you're leaning into. So I think that faith is ultimately what that is.
Okay.
Is that?
I actually I'm not trying to like blow smoke up your rear end. I really, really love that definition because you're one of the few people that have given me a definition that actually tracks for me logically. You're not giving me some weird, smoky, mystical, avoid the question definition. It's like, okay, this is how I see it, clearly defined, cool, bow on it, moving on. That's wonderful. So I promised you at the beginning before we started recording that I would give you some time towards the tail end of our conversation, which we are rapidly approaching, to sort of give people some insights into, I guess, whatever it is that you want to share about yourself and your work and how to find you. So this is the time where I will shut up and give the floor entirely to you.
Okay, thank you. So my business name is Journey Through Tarot. You can find me at journeythroughtarot.com. I am on Instagram at Journey Through Tarot. And I offer email readings, I offer a couple different kinds of readings, depending on what you're comfortable with, budget, things like that. So my email readings are probably the most affordable, and you don't even have to talk to me at all. So if you don't want to speak to me and you just want to get my insight, you can do an email reading, which is where you ask a question, and then I will respond with a personalized recorded reading for you with a picture of the cards that were drawn. And then I also offer private sessions, and that ranges from 15 minutes with me up to an hour. And you can find all of that information on my website at journeythroughtarot.com. And then if you're interested in a session, I am offering a discount. I think it's 20% off if you just use the code word journey in all caps. And yeah, and I'm on Instagram, so please feel free to follow me, or if you have questions for me, I'd love to, connect or interact with you if you want to reach out. But that's pretty much it.
Okay, Sarah, well, I very, very much appreciate your time. I appreciate the insights that you have facilitated. I appreciate you introducing me to tarot and introducing me to the idea that, man, I had everything wrong about what it is and isn't. Like, I couldn't have possibly been more off base. And I've developed a newfound respect and curiosity for how this works. So it's something I'm definitely going to be looking more into. I have a strong suspicion that me and or my wife will be in contact with you for further readings in the future, because this is just great stuff. And anybody who knows me in real life or even through the podcast knows that this is not the sort of thing that normally would get me excited. So please take my excitement as a really, really good endorsement that whether or not you believe in the quote unquote magic of the whole situation, whether or not we understand how it works, I would say based on this experience today that it does work. I don't need to dissect it to find out how. I don't care how. I care about the results, not the mechanics. Just like when I get in a car or an airplane, I don't need to understand every nut and bolt that's gone into it. I just understand that it's getting me where I need to go. Sarah, wow, thank you so very, very much for your time today. And I really don't know what else to say. Just thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and being open-minded to experiencing what I offer and, you know, what I bring with the wisdom, I guess, around tarot. So thank you for having me. I'm just so excited to be here.
Anytime.